when the general's voice cracked over the radio asking for a sniper. 79-year-old Anton Petrov set down his ladle and reached for the rifle he swore he'd never touch again. The command tent fell silent. Outside, mortars thundered in the distance, shaking the frozen ground beneath their feet. Inside, young soldiers' boys, really, none older than 25, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding the general's eyes. General Markov had asked a simple question. Who among you can shoot at 1,500 meters in wind like this? The silence that followed wasn't born of cowardice, it was born of honesty. None of them could. The enemy had positioned a heavy machine gun nest on the ridge overlooking the only supply route into the valley. 3 convoys had already been torn apart trying to push through. Without a sniper capable of making an impossible shot, the entire battalion would be cut off by morning. Markov's jaw tightened. He was about to repeat the question when a voice, quiet but steady, rose from the back of the tent. I can make that shot. Every head turned. Standing in the doorway, still wearing his stained apron, was Anton Petrov, the battalion cook. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. The soldiers stared. Some smiled, thinking it was a joke. Others looked away, embarrassed for the old man. One lieutenant even laughed, a sharp, nervous sound that cut through the cold air. But General Markov didn't laugh. He knew Anton. He'd known him for 40 years, and he knew something the younger men didn't. Anton Petrov wasn't just a cook. He was a ghost, a legend whispered about in the intelligence archives, but never confirmed. A name that appeared in enemy reports from wars long forgotten. Always the same description: one shot, impossible distance, gone before dawn. Markov stepped forward, his boots crunching against the icy floor. Anton, he said quietly, you haven't held a rifle in 30 years. Anton's eyes, pale blue, faded by time, but still sharp, met the general's without flinching. 32, he corrected, and I didn't think I'd ever need to again. He paused, his weathered hands trembling slightly at his sides. But if no one else can do it, then I will. The wind outside howled, rattling the tent's canvas walls. Somewhere in the darkness, another mortar exploded, closer this time. The war wasn't waiting. Markov exhaled slowly, then nodded. Get him a rifle, he said, and someone find him a spotter. No one moved. Then, from the corner, a young corporal named Dmitri stepped forward. He was barely 19, with a thin face and nervous hands. I'll go with him, Dmitri said, his voice cracking slightly. Anton looked at the boy, and something softened in his expression, something almost fatherly. You ever been in a sniper hide before, son? Dmitri shook his head. No, sir. Anton smiled faintly. Then stay close and stay quiet. If you're lucky, you'll be bored for 3 hours, and then we'll walk back here and have hot tea. They left. Within the hour, Anton traded his apron for a thick coat that smelled of diesel and old sweat. Someone handed him a rifle, a Dragunov SVD, familiar but foreign in his hands after so many years. He checked the chamber with movements so automatic, they seemed to bypass his conscious mind entirely. Muscle memory, the kind that never fades, no matter how long you try to bury it. Dmitri walked beside him, carrying the spotting scope and ammunition. They moved through the snow in silence, their breath misting in the freezing air. The ridge was 2 kilometers away, uphill through dense forest and open ground. Every step felt heavier than the last, not because of the terrain but because Anton could feel the weight of what he was returning to, the version of himself he thought he'd left behind. They reached the position just before midnight. Anton chose a spot beneath a fallen tree, half buried in snow, with a clear line of sight to the ridge. Dmitri set up the scope, his hands shaking not from cold, but from fear. Anton settled into the snow, feeling the familiar ache in his knees, the way the cold bit into his bones. He positioned the rifle, adjusting the scope with slow, deliberate movements. Through the lens, he could see the machine gun nest. 2 men, maybe 3, moving in and out of view. The distance was just over 1,500 meters. The wind was gusting, unpredictable, cutting left to right in sharp bursts. It was, by every measure, an impossible shot. Dmitri whispered, How do you know where to aim? Anton didn't answer right away. He closed his eyes, listening, not to the wind but to something deeper, the rhythm of the world around him, the way the trees bent, the way the snow shifted, the way his own heartbeat slowed, steadied, became a metronome. You don't think, Anton finally said. You feel. 3 hours passed. The cold became unbearable. Dmitri's teeth chattered. Despite his layers, But Anton remained still, barely breathing, watching, waiting. Then, in the pale light before dawn, one of the enemy soldiers stepped into view. Just for a moment, a silhouette against the snow. Anton exhaled, slowly, smoothly, his finger found the trigger. The rifle cracked once, a single, sharp sound that echoed across the valley and disappeared into the wind. Through the scope, the soldier dropped. The machine gun fell silent. Dmitri gasped. You hit him." Anton lowered the rifle, his hands trembling now, not from age, but from something else, something he'd tried to forget. "Let's go home," he said quietly. When they returned to camp, the sun was rising. The convoy had already moved through the valley, unscathed. Soldiers poured out of tents, cheering, clapping Anton on the back. Dmitri was grinning, telling anyone who would listen about the shot. But Anton didn't smile. He walked straight to the command tent, handed the rifle back to General Markov, and said only 3 words, "I'm done now." Markov nodded. He didn't ask questions. He simply placed a hand on Anton's shoulder and said, "Thank you, old friend." Anton returned to his kitchen. He tied his apron back on, picked up his ladle, and began preparing breakfast. His hands still shook, but this time it wasn't from the rifle. It was from the relief of knowing he'd never have to pick one up again. That evening, Dmitri found him alone by the stove. The young corporal hesitated, then asked the question that had been burning in him all day. "Why did you volunteer?" "You didn't have to." Anton stirred the pot slowly, watching steam rise into the cold air. "Because no one else could," he said simply, "and because I know what it costs." He paused, then looked at Dmitri with those pale, unflinching eyes. "Every shot I ever took, I carried with me, every face, every name I never learned. I stopped because I couldn't carry any more." His voice dropped to a whisper. "But when I heard that call, I couldn't let those boys die because I was too afraid to remember." Dmitri didn't know what to say, so he just stood there, in the warmth of the kitchen, beside an old man who had saved them all. That night, the battalion ate hot soup, and though no one said it aloud, every soldier in that camp understood something they hadn't before. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet decision of an old man who steps forward when no one else can. Sometimes it's the willingness to carry one more weight, even when you've already carried more than anyone should. Because courage isn't measured by the battles you fight, it's measured by the ones you fight even when you thought you were done. And as Anton Petrov ladled soup into bowls, his hands steady once more, he knew he'd made the right choice, not because it was easy, but because some things matter more than peace. If this story moved you, drop a comment below and let me know your words mean more than you know. And if you believe in the quiet heroes among us, hit that subscribe button. These are the stories that need to be told.